we'll look at some questions here and then do some activities in the other room. What I'm wanting to do each morning to bring some little quotation about mathematics from different people. Some will be profound, some will be hilarious, whatever. So this is somebody, Thomas Hill. Actually, I'm not quite sure quite what he's famous for, but he made the comment, mathematics is usually considered as being the very antipodes, or maybe antithesis, of poetry. Yet mathesis and poesy are of the closest kindred, for they are both works of the imagination. Remember I was saying yesterday, the idea of one. That's working in the imagination. And so many people think mathematics is just purely utilitarian, that I just need to be able to count the sheep that I've got, or count the shekels, the money that I've got. It's more than that. Okay. Now this comes from this Anderson writing Active Arithmetic, a couple of pages here. Because arithmetic and mathematics are two subjects which are most difficult to see in relationship to the child's world, it is the area where it's easiest to make the mistake of regarding children as adults in miniature. That's a huge mistake that happens everywhere, sometimes with teachers, often with parents, thinking their child, yes, this is just as another companion, a little adult. And children who are little adults can sometimes be a bit of a pain. That is, the practical aspect of occupation and the requisite skills overwhelmingly dominates over the consideration of relating to a child's nature and the child's needs imaginatively. So that's his picture. So that you need to think that our purpose in learning mathematics is not as part of a when you're learning things, when you go to tertiary institutions, you're learning things for a profession or otherwise, that's not the place of school. That's the place of tertiary study, is preparing you for the workplace. It's not the place of childhood education. You're trying to really develop human skills, not job skills at school. So more from Anderson. As adults, we live in our thoughts, which give impulse to our emotional life, and from our emotional life, we feel this or that, and that stimulates our will. That's from our emotion, we think, that would be good to do, and so you direct your will. For children, works the other way. They work out of their will first. For children, it's just the opposite. They live out their daily lives in untiring, playful activity. Children will give some thought to planning their play, but often it's in the moment, isn't it? What comes across, or the interaction with other children. It's not scripted. They don't. There may be some that try and make a script. There's a certain time in the kindergarten when children can remember what's at kindergarten, and they have a plan. They're going to do this and that, and they can see for it. It's usually around the age of 5 or 5 plus they do that. And I know my wife, who's been a kindergarten teacher, can sometimes say you get some children who spend a lot of time busy planning. They may get to the kindergarten, sit down with some friends and plan, and by the time they're finished planning, the playtime's over. You can have that kind of situation. So that's a little bit more unusual. But for general children, they live through the will, and it's what we've got to do is bring a kind of reflective aspect so that they can learn from that. At school, the child's emotional life becomes enriched and more complex. then that's compared with just being at home. You come to school and there's a whole social, remember about the soul realm and the community and the whole social realm, that you get the enrichment of meeting others. That's one of the challenges of homeschooling, is that not seeing enough of other children to get the roundness, the picture of the variety of human life. So I think there's often now homeschooling associations where people can find a state where they can come together and at least have a social aspect, even if it's not in a school situation. So from this foundation arises the clear, awakened thought life of adulthood. So they start from the will through the emotions and then coming to thought life. As a poet puts it, what are thoughts but feelings that have become conscious of themselves? An interesting picture, isn't it? Thoughts are feelings that have become conscious of themselves. Interesting. Anyone relate to that? Feelings that have become conscious of themselves. Hold it as a thought. Okay. Thus, education is a threefold process with the concept coming last. That's an education. Because adults often start with the concept and think, how are we going to bring it about? But for children and learning, there's activity, and out of the activity, you'll develop a concept. That's what learning is about. Socrates, from 2,500 or so years ago, or more, we can only act as a midwife for the abilities that are already latent in the child. It's an interesting picture, isn't it? That a child brings with them things that now have to have an opportunity to seed, to grow, to bud, to flower, and to fruit. You know, these are interesting things. As teachers, we need to create opportunities for growth. Again, you'll find that all in the book by Henning Anderson on active arithmetic. So, one picture you can have with teaching. First, in any activity, you need to engender some enthusiasm for some activity, some sort of introductory thing, and then you go to the activity, and so this is very much now with the will and our limbs, and finally coming to an understanding. You stop the activity and reflect. So what did you learn from it? So that there the concept part comes last. So that's you might say the process of learning. It's a little bit like from the heart to the limbs to the head. If you can picture that. We'll come back to the 12 senses later on, because that it's strange that people today even talk about 5 senses, when it's clear there are far more. But it's either people have forgotten to count, but the basic 5 senses considered are touch, smell, taste, colour, and tone. Those are the classic 5, and perhaps because they are the ones that we've become most conscious of. For a long time, the sense of warmth and the sense of touch were put together. Because, why would they be confused? Not the same, but they use the skin, yes, but they're actually separate. They're separate senses inside there. But yes, it's all over the skin, so it was considered. But actual touch and warmth are quite different things. So touch is when something foreign pushes into your space, and then you can feel, that's something's come into my space. I can feel that. Whereas warmth is when either warmth is leaving the body or coming in. There's either a process. And you feel comfortable usually when it's steady, so that sometimes you can be losing a lot of warmth or gaining a lot of warmth. You can experience that with a sense of warmth. But these others here, life, movement and balance, are ones that you're not so conscious of. And these ones, Rudolf Steiner calls spiritual senses. Again, you might say they're all hidden within the sense of tone. You might go, all of those, I sometimes call the sense of hearing. There's different levels within hearing. But we'll have one morning talk will be looking at the 12 senses. But what I want to note here is there's 3 at this level: a sense of movement, a sense of colour, and a sense of concept. So colour is one aspect of your sense of sight. But it's interesting that there's another aspect to your eye other than the retina. There are a lot of muscles around your eye, very fine muscles for focusing and moving. Your eye's almost always on the move. There's in physics, you can sometimes have children where they do what are called after images. And to achieve that, they get people to focus strongly on one object, so your eyes don't move. It's a real imposition on your sense of sight, which is always moving. It's incredibly sanguine, is your sense of sight. And so you get a strange effect called after images if you force your sight to look at something for a long time. And so there's one part of your sense of sight is the movement of your eye movements, focusing with something and quickly moving around. So those two are tied into the sense of sight. And concept or idea. What do you say when you've got an idea? Oh, I see. It's the same, it's at the same level, as it were. All this is to do with seeing. But these 3 aspects of seeing are connected with what's called the sort of 3 learning styles. They usually call it VAK, visual, oral, kinesthetic, but I think there's a different order. That is, kinesthetic connects with this one, visual with this one, and oral with this one. And you might say, this is a dominant one. They're all there, but this, you might say, is a dominant one in early childhood. Movement, kinesthetic, play. And here, visual is perhaps dominant, there's a question on this, in the lower school, because you all the time, even in your stories, you are picture building. You're building pictures, pictorial thinking, which is a kind of has a kind of visual element. And then talking with ideas, the oral, the listening, just what you're doing now, except you're also looking at that. But this oral of really trying to get, what's the concept? What he's actually trying to say? Can I get this idea? Can I connect with the idea? And you might say, that is the third 7 years, high school and university. So these 3 things. Of course, people at university like to move and see things as well. So they're all there, but there's a kind of different emphasis and contact there. But you need to be using all of them. And there's a big danger is when you stick only with one. Threefoldness in life. We'll keep coming back to this in different ways. The top line there is looking at life in 3 stages. This sort of like is preparing for war, fighting, and then licking your wounds afterwards. Could be one way of looking at it. It's a rather warlike picture. But you could also say, first 21 years preparing for life, next 21 years living life, and the last years learning from life. They all go on, of course. You do keep preparing, and you keep living, and you're learning. The learning from life also comes down here, but you might say this is more dominant. First 21 years, your body you're building your body so that normally by 21 you don't grow anymore. At least you certainly hope you don't grow anymore. I mean, there's different phases when you grow up and you grow out and you grow up and you're out, but generally the only way you grow after 21 is this way, and that's, you usually don't want to do that. But usually around 18 you've reached your height for life. You know, we had one boy in our school that kept growing beyond that, and he sort of went way up there, and I was feeling sorry for him. Come on, stop, you know. It's it was sort of some sort of hormonal problems, I think. And so here, 21 years, building the body. Here, the soul time, experiencing life, going out into the world, leaving home, experiencing the world. And then spirit, penetrating. What is the meaning of life? What does all this mean? There's also a stage that here you build and you grow, and here you can sort of feel on top of life, and generally around here there's what's called a midlife crisis. So what does that mean? It's an interesting thing that through this stage many people can be quite competitive. I want to be the best, you know. And there comes a stage, depending what you're doing, when actually you can no longer be the best. And other people start getting better than you. And that's a real crisis, unless you manage it. You know what how many people have got to the stage where they know what I'm talking about? And you see, you actually have to, there's a wonderful change between being kind of outer to becoming inner. It's sort of, it's taking on the spirit aspect. And it's actually, you have to go from saying, not can I be best and first, but turning to how can I help other people? Instead of myself now, how can I help others? It's a real turnaround. And it's because you can't keep on going until your 70s, still being top athlete or top whatever it is, you know. You have to think, actually, there are other people, well, and I am in a situation, I can help them. It's a real, it's a turning inward element to say, to go forward. And people who can't make this are destined for a second puberty. That tends to go out that they divorce, get a new sports car, a new wife, and new life, and so on, and by totally avoiding, or new husband, I should perhaps have some cases, but totally avoiding the issue here through this time of now beginning to turn inwards and learn from life and say, how can I help others? And some people say that this is a time of you turn from soul to spirit, and there are some people, this is only anecdotal you might say, that yes, they turn to the spirit, but it comes in a bottle. The spirit does come in a bottle, so it's actually a time people, because they can't cope, they turn to drink, and obliterates, so that it's sort of, that totally avoids them having to do this, which is really unfortunate. So occasionally you'll find people, they get to that stage and it's a kind of despair because they don't see that their role is changing. So this is not quite about maths, is it? But still, it's about life. Then taking these years into threefold, birth to 7, 7 to 14, 14 to 21, here developing the physical body, here developing the etheric body, here developing the astral body. You see, after all, we start from just, you know, egg and sperm, you know, that sort of very beginning. All these other things have to develop. And we start again. We don't sort of go, we don't grow 100, 200, 300 years because we've kind of, we need to stop this life and start afresh. Isn't it wonderful? You imagine if you just lived and you got to 900, and, you know, isn't it wonderful? We can have a new start, fresh start, and do it all again. Well, maybe you don't feel that way, but But that is what happens. It's interesting, of course it's the head that carries so much of the past. And this is a more macabre element, but there's certain forms of execution, and the French were very good at it because they were so intellectual. What you do, you cut off the head, and that's what we're getting rid of the past, and it's like saying, time to start again. Okay, that's a macabre joke. But there's a strange wisdom in that. Not that I'm recommending it, but that somewhere they've picked up on that in a very subconscious way. So there's then different qualities that you're trying to inculcate in these times, doing the building of the organs, that there's a kind of reverence and goodness, and through the middle 7 years, the arts and beauty, and the third 7 years, science and truth. There might be a leading themes. Not that they're absent in the others, but you might say they're the leading themes for those ages. And then in the middle 7 years, in the lower school, that also goes into 3 phases. 7 to 9, it's about 28 months, this difference, and that varies from person to person. But after that time, there's what's called a 9-year-old crisis, a soul awareness, an inner awakening happens, things change. And then another 28 months working with the feeling, and then there's a new change, a whole puberty and a whole threshold of adolescence, seeking independence happens here. It's a threshold that's often ignored to the peril of the teacher. And now you tend to working with thinking and the head. Here the heart, here the hands. So this threefoldness keeps coming and appearing throughout education. And so we take that in the maths, just to give an idea that the first third of those, before 9th year, you're working with the will, active will, doing, whole numbers, analysis from whole to part is the kind of key activities there. Between 9 and 12, engage feelings, and that comes through looking at relationships, inner to outer, measurement, that's how you relate to other things through measurement, ratio and fractions, rich, poor, prime and perfect numbers, all to do with relationships. And after puberty, the experiences of logical thinking, and some of the things you do is perspective drawing, Pythagoras' theorem, algebra, solving problems by withholding judgment, that's my definition of algebra, astronomy, that is movement, discerning different viewpoints. There's a viewpoint. If you stand on the earth, you see how things move. If you stand on the sun, or if you could imagine yourself standing on the sun, you see things in a different way. If you stand out in space and look back, you see things in a different way. All these different visions of the solar system come from taking different standpoints. And this, for these older children, take somebody else's point of view, not just your own. Stand outside yourself and look at what's going on from another point of view. It's a very powerful thing that those people at that age need to do. Okay, we're going to go, and there's now some activities. We'll go down to the other room. We've got, yeah, okay. So, let's head down to the other room. Turn that down.